We begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph on the first line. It said in the Mishnah, Loi cholzin v'loi miyabmin. That on Yontif and on Shabbos you're not allowed to do not chalitza and not yibum. And the Mishnah referred to this as something which is a rishus. In the language of the Mishnah, when it says rishus, it doesn't mean something that is not related to a mitzvah at all. It means something which is a rishus, it's related to a mitzvah, but it's not an obligation of a mitzvah. So the Gemara asks the question, V'ha mitzvah ka'aved, whether he's doing chalitza, whether he's doing yibum, isn't he doing a mitzvah? So how could the Mishnah refer to it as something which is related to a mitzvah, but it's called a rishus? So the Gemara answers, Lo tzriche de ikke gadol. The case of the Mishnah here is that there's an older brother, and the mitzvah of Yibum belongs to the oldest brother, as Rashi over here brings, V'haya b'chayr. Mitzvah begadol yavim, it's the mitzvah for the gadol to do the Yibum. Now the Gemara explains regarding this part of the Mishnah, what's the reason why they're asur on Yontif and on Shabbos, V'kulu, and all of these that were mentioned here. In other words, starting from what it said regarding Kedushin, that Ein Mekachin, and Lecholtzin, V'lemiyabmin, and so on, and Leidonin as well. So all of these, the Gemara says, Taimemai, what's the reason why they're asur? Gzeire Shema Yichtov. The Gzeire is that you might come to write on Yontif. So like Rashi says, the Psaktin you could write, or by a Kedushin you write the Shtar Eresin, and by Chalitza, there's also a Shtar Chalitza that's written, and there's a Ksubah for the Yevameh, so that's the Gzeire that you might come to write. Then the Mishnah said, Ve'elein mishum mitzvah lo makdishim v'lo marichim v'lo machrimin. The following things are a mitzvah. You're not allowed to be makdish something, and erechen, and cherem, which are also other forms of hektish. What's the reason for this, Isser? Gzeire mishum mekach memke. The reason is that you might come to make a sale, and you're not allowed to sell anything on Shabbos or Yontif. Rashi brings that this is the pasuk where it says Mimtzei cheftzecha v'da bedavar. So therefore, there's a gzeira that you shouldn't do anything else that can bring you to Mekach HaMemker. Then Rashi says that Mekach HaMemker itself, even if you don't learn it from this pasuk, it's also asur because of the gzeira that you might come to write documents by a sale. And even though this may seem to be a gzeira l'gzeira, Rashi says it's not. It's all one gzeira. It was all made at the same time that you shouldn't come to write. The next thing the Gemara says, it said in the Mishnah, V'loi magbien trumis u'maisris. You're not allowed to separate trumis and maisris on Shabbos and Yontif. Fragt the Gemara, pshita, isn't this obvious? Since when you're separating trumis and maisris, you're taking the fruits and the produce that were not fit to eat, and you're mesaken. You make it fit for eating, so it's obvious that that's not allowed. And for the Gemara, Tani Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef explained that this Mishnah here is actually saying a chiddush. That the case over here is that you're bringing these trumas and maisres to the kayin on that day. So if you're bringing it to the kayin on that day, so as Rashi explains, it would look like that you're not doing this for the purpose to be mesakin the produce that you should be able to eat it, but rather you want to bring the kayin, the truma that he needs to eat on that day for Simchas Yontif. So since it looks like you're doing it for that purpose, not for the purpose of mesakin, for yourself, I would think that it's mutter. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah, that even in such a case, when you're delivering it to the kayin on the Yontif, you're not allowed to be mesakin, you're not allowed to separate the trumas and maises. Now the Gemara explains, V'hanim mili peiri de tfili me'esma. This halacha that you're not allowed to separate trumas and maisres, which are tevel, is if it was tevel, if it was supposed to be separated already from yesterday. Alva peiri de tvili ha'idna, but produce that became tevel today, what kind of an example is that? Kogoin isa, for example, a dough la frushi mino chala, to separate the chala from this, which was a sugya before in the first Peirik, about separating the chala from a dough on Yontif. So that, mafreshinon, you're allowed to separate it on Yontif itself, via vinon lekayin, and you can give it to the kayin. Okay, so now that the Gemara concluded explaining the different gzeiros that are mentioned in the Mishnah, the Gemara now wants to understand the way the Mishnah categorizes this. If you look back in the Mishnah, so it said in the Mishnah that there are things that are yechayiv mishum shvus, which means there's a gzeira of chazal. Then it said mishum rishus, there are things that are permissible, and then there are things that are mishum mitzvah, that are a mitzvah. So the Gemara asks on this language of the Mishnah, fragt the Gemara, v'hani, and these in the category here that the Mishnah says that are mishum rishus, that are permissible things. So mishum reshus ikke, mishum shvus leke, these things that are permissible. So there is no gzeira of a shvus. It's not osir chazal. I'm not saying that there's an issa over here that they are making in this. And vahani mishum mitzvah. And those that the Mishnah refers to them as a mitzvah, ikke, so it's a mitzvah, but mishum shvus leke, there is no shvus. In other words, the Gemara is asking a simple question. It seems from the lashon of the Mishnah that the first category it mentions is a shvus. Shvus meaning a gzeira of chazal, that it's aser. Then the other two categories, rishus and mitzvah, it doesn't use the term rishus. But isn't the pshat in the Mishnah here that there's the gzeira of chazal to aser in all of these cases? Not only the ones that it refers to as shvus, that is, the other ones that it refers to as rishus and as mitzvah, there are also cases where chazal made a shvus to aser them. So why does the Mishnah use the term shvus only regarding the first category? So the Gemara explains, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, the pshat and the way you read the Mishnah is as follows. The Mishnah over here is telling you that the chiddush is in the first case, and there's even more of a chiddush in the second category, and then in the third category. And you read the Mishnah this way: the aser, needless to say, in the first category of the cases where Chazal made a gzeira that it's forbidden, ela filishvos the rishos nami aser. But Chazal added and said even such things that are a rishus. Rishus meaning that it's something that's related to a mitzvah. Rashi here uses a very interesting lashon. L'chluach mitzvah. It has the moisture of a mitzvah. It's related to a mitzvah. So the second category is that Chazal aser even things that are rishus related to a mitzvah. And then v'loy mi ba yishvus the rishus, not only things that are shvus that are in the category of rishus the aser that Chazal said are aser, ela fila shvus the mitzvah nami aser. Then Chazal applied their shvus even to certain things that are actually a mitzvah, but nevertheless Chazal will geizer their gzeira that it's aser on Shabbos and Yontif. So in other words, when the Mishnah says rishus and mitzvah, it's not excluding the expression of shvus that it started with. What it's saying is that you have a shvus in a case where it's not related to a mitzvah at all, and then the bigger chiddush is that Chachamim applied their shvus even to a rishus related to a mitzvah, and they applied their shvus even to something which is a mitzvah mamish. So the Gemara, Kol Eilu b'Yom Tov Amru, so the Mishnah concludes and says that all of these shvusim were said for Yom Tov, and it's the same on Shabbos, and there's no difference in the gzeiros of Chazal between Yom Tov and Shabbos besides Oichel Nefesh, when it comes to preparing things for eating. So the Gemara asks on this, what's with the very first Mishnah of our Pedic? V'ramino, the question is, it said in the first Mishnah, Mashilin derech haruba b'Yom Tov, you have the produce on the roof and it's going to rain, so the Mishnah says on Yom Tov, Chazal allowed you to throw down that produce into your house, avaloi b'Shabbos, but on Shabbos they did not allow that tirche. So right over here you see that there's a gzeira of a shvus that Chazal made only for Shabbos, and not for Yom Tov. So they were more machmer regarding Shabbos than Yom Tov, even though this is not something which is related to Eichel Nefesh. Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef answers like Kashya. It's not a question. Ha Rabbi Eliezer and Ha Rabbi Yeshua. The first Mishnah of the Pedic and this Mishnah here are not the same man da Amrim. One is Rabbi Eliezer and one is Rabbi Yeshua, as the Gemara here brings the source. The Tanya, we learned in the Beitza. Oisai ve'ez benoi shenaflu lebar. You have an animal and its child that both fell into a pit on Yontif, and you want to save them. They'll stay inside over there, and you want to get them out on Yontif. So what do? Rabbi Eliezer says that on Yontif you could be lenient in the following way. So you take up the first one with the condition, having in mind that you're going to shecht it, and then that one that you brought up in order to shecht it, to eat from it, so then you have to shecht that one. And v'hasheni oisaloi parnasa b'mekaymai kedei shelo. The second animal that's still in the pit, because you don't need it for the meat, because you already shechted the first one, you have to leave it inside the pit, and you feed it, you send down food for it inside the pit, that it should stay inside over there and eat the food. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. So you cannot take out both of the animals. You only are allowed to take out what you need for Eichel Nefesh. More than Eichel Nefesh, there is no leniency. Rabbi Yeshua says when it comes to Yom Tiv, there's more of a leniency. You bring up the first animal, with the condition that you want to shecht it for its meat, for eichel nefesh, and then vein shechetai. Then you don't shecht this one, and then you say, oh, I don't like the meat of this animal, and v'chayzer amayrim amayla asheni, and then you play a trick and you bring up the other one and you say, I like the meat of the second animal better. And now, rotza zeh shechet and rotza zeh shechet. After you brought up both of them out of the pit, you can shecht either one of them. And this is a specific leniency on Yontif that they allowed you to be maidim, to play this trick sort of, by bringing out both of the animals, saying that you want both of them for eating, even though you don't need both of them for eichel nefesh. So therefore, what do you see over here? Rabbi Yeshua was more lenient regarding the shvos on Yontif more than Shabbos. That on Yontif you could be maidim. On Shabbos there's no such a thing. Whereas when it comes according to Rabbi Eliezer, he only allows you to take out from the pit what you need for eichel nefesh. More than that, there's no leniency. So our Mishnah over here goes according to Rabbi Eliezer, that says that there's no additional distinction between Shabbos and Yontif besides eichel nefesh. The first Mishnah in the Perek that says that Chachamim were more lenient with the Shvus on Yontif follows Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. But the Gemara now questions the comparison from that machlokes to our case here. Amalei Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Mimai, how do you know to compare that machlokes to our case? Dilme, perhaps, at kan lekama Rabbi Eliezer hosam elo de'efshe beparnasa. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer only said over there that you're not allowed to bring up both animals from the pit. He was machmeh there because you have an eitzah. You can feed the animal while it's still in the pit. Aval hacha, but over here, what is it speaking about? The produce that's on the rooftop, and it's going to rain, and it's going to destroy your produce. You don't have such a kind of a eitzah to go and feed. Over here, it's going to get destroyed. Maybe over here, he wasn't as stringent. Maybe he agrees that over here, there is a leniency on Yontif more than Shabbos. Yinami, or I can tell you a different distinction from that case to what we're speaking about here. At kan lekama Rabbi Yeshua hosam elo de'efshe la'arumi. The only reason why Rabbi Yeshua was lenient there is because there's harama. You bring up one and you say, I want this to eat. And then you say, no, I'm not going to use it. I see it's not good enough. And then you bring up the other one and you say, I want that to eat. So over there's this possibility of playing this trick. And therefore, that's sort of something that we rely on for the kula to be mekel on Yontif. But over here, that there's no harama that's involved in this. There's no eitza of harama over here. It's just a question of whether you can throw down this produce that's on the rooftop or not. So maybe over here, he would not be lenient. So therefore, Abaye says you can't compare the circumstances there by the two animals that are in the pit to the case that we're speaking about over here. So Elam Rav Papa explains that Loikashya, the contradiction we have over here of the first Mishnah that says that they are more lenient regarding Yontif over Shabbos, and this Mishnah that says that we're not more lenient, so it's not a question because Ha Beis Shammai and Ha Beis Hillel. One is Beis Shammai, and the other is Beis Hillel. The Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, and this was the Mishnah in the first Perek, Beis Shammai, Yomrim Beis Shammai say, that on Yontif, you're not allowed to carry into the Rishus Harabim a baby or a lulav or a sefer Torah, meaning on Yontif they only allowed haitzah for the purpose of eichel nefesh. Any other kind of haitzah they did not allow. We had the sugi, we learned it before in the Gemara. Beis Shammai held there's no such a thing as mitoich shehutra l'tzairech hutra shaloi l'tzairech. There is no mitoich. They only allowed eichel nefesh and not anything else besides eichel nefesh. So Beis Shammai is the source of what it says here in our Mishnah that there's no distinction between Shabbos and Yontif besides eichel nefesh. There is no other mitoich. There is no additional heter besides that. What Beis Hillel matirin? Beis Hillel allows to take out the lulav, sefer Torah, and so on to the Rishus Harabim because Beis Hillel said there's a mitoich. So once they allowed, the Torah allowed Hitzah for Eichel Nefesh, you also allow Hitzah for other purposes. So the same thing over here, Beis Hillel is more lenient regarding moving the produce that's on the rooftop and take it off when it's going to rain, is because Beis Hillel holds of mitoich, and therefore he allows the tiltul to remove that produce from its place. So the Gemara again asks that it's not necessarily the same thing. Dilme, perhaps, loihi, maybe you can't compare the two cases. At kan lekamri Beis Shammai hasam ela ahitza. Beis Shammai was only saying over there regarding haitzah, regarding the malacha of haitzah. There, Beis Shammai was saying that the Torah wasn't matter more than eichel nefesh, and there is no mitoich. But when it comes over here regarding tiltul, maybe Beishamai would agree that the tiltul of moving the produce on the rooftop, like it said in the first mission of Apedik, maybe that is allowed. Beishamai didn't speak about tiltul, just removing the produce within the Rishus HaYachid, not taking it into the Rishus HaRabim. Maybe Beishamai only says that actual Haitzah into the Rishus HaRabim is not allowed. But regarding just moving this produce on the rooftop, that Beishamai never said is not allowed. So the Gemara does not accept this distinction. Otu tiltul lav tzorich haitzahu. When it comes to the gzeira on tiltul, not to move something which is muktzeh, isn't that related to the malacha of haitzah? That Chachamim did not allow certain things to move them because you might come to take it out. As Rashi says, every time you take something out to the Rishus HaRabim, it always starts with tiltul. And therefore, they only were geyser on tiltul, that certain things are muktzah, that you shouldn't move them if the malach of Haitzah applies. So if, according to Beishamai, the malach of Haitzah applies, the Isser of tiltul applies as well. These two things go together. And if there's no Isser of tiltul, of Haitzah that is, there's no Isser of tiltul. So therefore you can't distinguish between these two things, and therefore this is the answer to the difference between the first Mishnah and the Pedic, which is Beis Hillel, that allows Haitzah Shalei L'Tzairich, and he allows the tiltul as well, and Beishamai that does not allow the Haitzah Shalei L'Tzairich Eichel Nefesh, so he does not allow that tiltul either. Zog Te'elige Mishnah. HaBeheime v'HaKelim. Okay, so this Mishnah here is going to be talking about the halacha of going out of the Tchum, and regarding Yontif, it applies uniquely for Yontif, unlike Shabbos, where the discussion of Tchum Shabbos, which we learned in Masechta Erevin, is talking about a person going out of Tchum Shabbos. But on Yontif, where you're allowed to carry, so this applies also to the objects that you're taking out of the Tchum. And therefore, the Mishnah here is going to tell us exactly how we establish the Tchum of an object, whose Tchum does this object follow, regarding taking it out of the Tchum of 2,000 Amos. So Zak the Mishnah, HaBeheime v'HaKelim, you have animals or kelim, vessels, Keragle HaBailim. You can carry them, you can walk with them, the same tchum as the owner of this behemoth and kelim can go with them. Okay, so a person could only take it to the 2,000 amas that he is allowed to go. So for example, if you made an eid of tchumen, an eid of tchumen means that you went to one side, you have a tchum that you can go to each side, 2,000 amas, but you went and you put your tchum to the tzafon side. So now you could only go to the tzafon side, 2,000 amas, and you take off from your ability to walk to darim when you make tchum towards tzafon. So if you could only go to tzafon side now with the tchum that you made over there, with the 8 of tchum you made there, the same status takes effect regarding the objects that you own, that when Shabbos came in, you are allowed to walk in that tzafon side because of your 8 of tchumin. So whatever you own is also in that same tchum as yourself. So that's regarding the things that a person owns. That's simple. But now, if you give your animal to your son or to a shepherd to take care of, so whose tchum does it have? Does it still retain the same tchum as the owner? Or does it get the tchum of your son or your shepherd that may have not made that 8 of tchumin to the tzafon side? They have a different tchum, they're going in a different direction. So the Mishnah, it still has the same tchum as the owner, even though you're giving it to your son or to a shepherd to take care of. If you have kalim in a house that are designated, it's designated to be used by one of the brothers in a household. So these are brothers that are yarshining from a father that passed away. And you have certain kalim that are designated for one brother to use for himself. So since it's designated for him, so those kalim could be taken in the tchum where he can go. But if it's kalim that are not designated for any of them, everybody uses it together. So then, so then the tchum follows everybody together. You have to look exactly where everybody could go to. And in other words, this kalim is going to be stuck within the tchum of all of the different brothers. If one made a tchum to tzaf and another one made to darim, so then the kalim are only going to be allowed to be taken in any area that's within everybody's tchum. You have to take into account everybody's tchum where they're allowed to go because it's being used by everybody. Sagt der Mishnah weiter, Hashoyel keli mechaveiroi me'erev Yom Tif. If you borrow a keli from your friend from before Yom Tif, so then keragli hashoyel. So the kelim could be taken on Yom Tif to the tchum of where the person, the borrower, took them. Because when Shabbos came in, when Yom Tif came in, we're not talking about Shabbos here, but when Yom Tif came in, Ben Hashmoshes, you already had borrowed it, it's in your possession. So therefore, at that time, the kelim become like the borrower, and it can take him wherever he can go to. Hashoyel b'yomtiv, but if you borrowed the kelim on yomtiv itself, then keragle amashal, then the kelim could only be taken to a place where the owner of the kelim was allowed to take them when yomtiv came in, because when yomtiv came in, which is the time that establishes what the tchum for these kelim are, b'chlal, that's how you establish the tchum Shabbos, for the person himself and for the kelim as well, only at the time of Ben Hashmoshes. So therefore, since when the yomtiv came in, it wasn't borrowed yet, so it goes according to the place where the owner can take it to. V'chein, a similar din, ha'isha sheshala mechaverta tavlin umayim umelach li'sasa. On yontif, a woman borrows from her friends spices or water or salt for her dough, and she's adding these ingredients from her friend to the food that she's cooking. So now, hare'elu keragli. So the food that she cooks, the tchum of this food, where it could be taken to, you have to take into account her own tchum, because she's using her own ingredients, and also if she put in ingredients from her friends, and she borrowed them, she took them on Yontif. So when Yontif came in, those ingredients that she borrowed was the ingredients of her friend, was the tchum of her friends. So therefore, you have to take into account the tchum of both of them. Rabbi Yehuda Paiter b'mayim. Rabbi Yehuda says when it comes to water, you do not have to take into account your friend's tchum that you took the water from, because it doesn't give any substance to the ingredients that you're making over here. And the Gemara will explain exactly what case we're talking about, where the water doesn't add, and therefore the tchum only goes according to this Isha herself, and she does not have to take into account her friend's tchum. Sagt the Gemara, Mas Nisen, the Loi Kerab Beitza. The Mishnah that says over here that when you give over your animal to a shepherd, that the tchum follows the owner and not the shepherd, seems to go not like the opinion of Rab Beitza. The Tanya and Abraisa we learned. Rab Beitza said, V'amri lo Abishol. Another said that Abishol said, Halekech beheme mechaveirei me'erev Yom Tif, a person that bought an animal from his friend from before Yom Tif, afal pishal e'masr le'ela b'Yom Tif, even though he didn't actually give it over to him until Yom Tif itself, harehi kiragle halekech, because he already bought it from before Yom Tif, so the tchum follows the buyer. But then Rab Beitza said, "V'hamayse beheme leroya." If you give your animal to a shepherd, even if he didn't give it to your shepherd only on Yom Tov itself, harehi keragli aroya. It follows the tchum of the shepherd. In our Mishnah it said that if you give it over to a shepherd on Yom Tov, so then it follows the tchum of the bailam, of the owner. It doesn't change if you gave it to him on Yom Tov. And here Rab Beitza is saying, you give it over to a shepherd, now the tchum goes according to the shepherd. So our Mishnah is not like Rab Beitza. Sorry, where am I holding over here? So the Gemara says, no. Afil teimer Rab Beitza. We could still say that our Mishnah follows Rab Beitza's opinion, v'lo kashya. And there's no contradiction here. Kan beroya echad. Rab Beitza is speaking about a city where there's only one shepherd. Everybody knows if you're giving your animals to a shepherd to take care of, there's only one shepherd to give it to. So even though you gave it to him on Yom Tov, but he's sort of designated for this from advance. Everybody knows that you're going to give it to him, and therefore the das of the bailam is that he's going to be the one taking care of the animal from the beginning of Yom Tov. That's what you were thinking. So therefore the tchum will go according to that shepherd. That's what Rab Beitza was speaking about. And Kan b'shnei. In our Mishnah, it's speaking about that there's more than one shepherd in the city. There's two shepherds in the city, and therefore you don't know who you would be giving it to. So when you give it to him on Yom Tov, so you can't say that it was already predestined that it would go to him when Yom Tov came in. It wasn't. There's two shepherds in the city here. Teikanami, the language of the Mishnah also proves this, that it's speaking about a city where there are two shepherds. Diktani, because our Mishnah said, L'benai oileraya, that you gave your animal on Yom Tov either to your son or to a shepherd. Shmamina. So what do we see over here? That we're not talking about a situation where a person gives his animal to a shepherd and there's no one else to give it to. There's only one shepherd to give it to. He could either give it to his son or he could give it to a shepherd. Or similar, he can give it to another shepherd, and therefore when it was given on Yontif, it already established the tchum of the owner when Yontif came in, and later when he chooses a certain shepherd to give it to, that doesn't change the status from what was already established in the beginning. Amar Rabba Baba Chones, Rabba Baba Chones said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halache kerab Beitza. We paskin like Rab Beitza. So the Gemara asks, so Miyam Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, did Rabbi Yochanan say that the halacha is like Rab Beitza? Over here in this case, that we paskin like Rab Beitza, that the tchum goes according to the shepherd. V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam mishnah. Didn't Rabbi Yochanan say that we paskin always like a stam mishnah? Utnan, and we learned here in our stam mishnah that ha-beheme v'ha-kelim kiraglei ha-bailim, that the beheme and the kelim always followed the raglim of the bailim. We go according to the tchum of the owner. And therefore, if after Yontif came in, you gave it over to a shepherd, it doesn't change the tchum of the bailim, not like Rab Beitza. So how could we say that Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rab Beitza? So the Gemara right away answers, but v'lave kimna, didn't we just explain kan beroya echad and kan b'shnei royim, that our Mishnah is speaking about when there are two shepherds, and therefore you don't know when Yontif comes in who you're going to be giving it to, so therefore it remains with the tchum of the bailim. And Abdais was talking about one raya. So from when Yontif comes in, you know you're going to give it to that shepherd, and therefore when he gets it on Yontif, it follows his tchum, as we explained before. So in other words, as the Mefarshim explained, Rabbi Yochanan was trying to say this itself, that I accept this answer from the Mishnah to Rab Beitza, and therefore we paskin like Rab Beitza when it comes to a case where there's one shepherd. Rabbanon shnayim sheshalu chaluk, two people that borrow the garment. Echad, chaluk echad, one garment. B'shutvis, they're partners with, they're going to use this garment together on Yontif. Zeh leilich by shachris lebeis hamedrish. One of them is going to use it in the morning to dress himself to go to shul. And v'zeh likonis by arvis lebeis hamishta. And the other person is going to use it in the evening to go to a meal with it. So whose tchum does this garment go according to? And Zeh Erev Olav L'Tzofen, one of them made an Erev Tchumen going to Tzofen's side, and Zeh Erev Olav L'Darim, and another one made an Erev Tchumen going to Darim's side. So what's the halacha? Zog the Mishnah or the Beitza, Zeh She Erev Olav L'Tzofen, the one that made a Tchum to go to Tzofen's side, Mahalach L'Tzofen, he's only going to be allowed to go towards Tzofen, Keragle Mi She Erev Olav L'Darim, as far as his partner that made an Erev to Darim's side will allow him to go. In other words, he has to take into account his friend's tchum. Since they borrowed this in partnership, and they both made a tchum in opposite directions, so now he's going to have to take into account, it follows the tchum of both of them. So for example, if you made a tchum that goes 1,000 amas towards Tzofan, and your other friend made a tchum going 1,000 amas towards Darim, so now he's going to take off 1,000 amas from your side going towards Tzofan because he went 1,000 amas towards Darim. So you have to take that into account. And the same thing also in the reverse. The Zeh of the Darim, the one that made an Erev Tchumen to go 1,000 amas further towards Darim, Mahalach l'Darim, Keraglim Yisherov Olav l'Tzofan. You can only go towards Darim as far as it allows you because of the Tchum of the other side, your partner that made a Tchum going towards Tzofan. V'im mitzu esatchum, if the end of each one of their Erev Tchumen is centered right in the middle, then you're not going to be able to move this garment from its place. Meaning, if in the middle is the spot where each one of their tchums ends. In other words, the person that made the tchum to Tzofan made it all the way out 2,000 amas towards Tzofan. So right here, where the garment is right now, this is the end of the 2,000 amas of his Erev towards Tzofan. And the same thing his partner. He made his tchum all the way at the end of 2,000 amas towards Darim. So now at this spot where the garment is, it's the end of that tchum of 2,000 amas towards Darim. So right over here at this center where this garment is the end of the both tchumen, towards Darim or towards Tzofan. So you're stuck, you're limited with the tchum of each side and you can't take the garment anywhere. So then you can't move it at all. Itmar, we learned the following machlekes. Shnayim shelokchu chavis ubeheme b'shutfis. Two people that bought a barrel of wine or an animal in partnership. So whose chum does it follow? Rav Omar, so Rav says, chavis muteres, that this barrel of wine, Each one is allowed to take it to his tchum that he made for himself. He does not have to take into account his friend's tchum. And behema asura. But the animal that they bought in partnership, that they have to take into account each other's tchum, and you're not allowed to take it outside of your own tchum and your friend's tchum as well. Shmuel says, chavis nami asura. That when it comes to a barrel, it's also asur, just like by a behema. You have to take into account your friend's tchum. The same thing also with a barrel of wine. You have to take into account a partnership, your friend's tchum, and you can't take it out of the tchum. So the Gemara is going to explain here. First, it's going to explain Rav, because Rav over here is making a distinction between the barrel of wine and an animal. The Gemara wants to understand what's the basis of this distinction. Frag the Gemara, Mai kasava Rav. So what's the basis of Rav's opinion? Kasavar yesh breide. If Rav holds yesh breide, this is a concept we had before many times. So to explain again, yesh breide means that I say that retroactively it can clarify what happened. Meaning that if you, and let's take this case right over here. They bought this barrel of wine in partnership. So part of it is going to be consumed by one and part by the other. When they bought it in partnership, it's all mixed together. But later, when one ends up drinking one part of the barrel of wine and the other one ends up drinking the other barrel of wine, so if I say yesh breire, what this means is retroactively this clarifies that the wine that you drank was only yours and the wine that the other person drank is only his. That's what yesh breire means. What ein breire would mean is that yes, now that I drank this part of wine, now that is mine. I had the right to drink it, and that is mine now. But it doesn't retroactively clarify that from the beginning it was split. That wine that I now drank was mine from the beginning, and the wine that my friend drank was his from the beginning. That's what ein breire means. So the question over here is whether retroactively, once you drink it now, do I say, does it retroactively clarify that it was really split from the beginning, that there was your part and your friend's part? So let's see the words of the Gemara inside. So what does Rav hold? If Rav holds that we do retroactively clarify, so then, if so, afilu behemoth tishteri. So I should say over here, both regarding the barrel of wine and regarding the animal, even though it's a partnership, but they're going to split it later on Yontif. And once they split it on Yontif, retroactively this clarifies that your part is yours and your friend's part is his, and therefore each one is allowed to take it to their tchum, and you do not have to take into account your friend's tchum, because retroactively it's just yours. Your friend's partnership is not in this at all. So there should be no distinction between the wine and the barrel and the animal. Both of them you should be allowed to take to your tchum. On the other hand, if, however, Rav's holds that we do not say that this retroactively clarifies that it was split from before, so even regarding the barrel of wine, it should also be forbidden for you to take it out of your friend's tchum. If only from now going forward, when you drank the barrel of wine or when you ate this meat, now that is yours. But from before, it was all mixed together. It was a partnership where it was owned together when the Yontif came in, when Bein Hashmashis of the Yontif came in. So therefore, that establishes the Tchum at Bein Hashmashis, that it was mixed, that it was both of yours together. So it should be forbidden for both the barrel of wine and the behemoth that you have to take into account your friend's Tchum. So basically, the question is simple. Why does Rav make a distinction between the barrel of wine and the behemoth? So the Gemara answers, L'olam kasava yesh breire. Really, Rav's opinion is yesh breire. We do say that it retroactively clarifies that it was split from before. But v'shanya behemoth. When it comes to an animal, over here it's different because the kayanki tchumi mahadodi. Even if you're going to say yesh breire, that each part of the animal retroactively clarifies that this part is yours and this part is his and it's not mixed, but nevertheless it's a living animal. And because it's a living animal, the limbs and the organs, they all take life from each other, and it's all flowing, connected to one another. So even if it's retroactively clarified that it's split and there's different parts, but if they're living from each other, it's still considered to be mixed. And therefore, when Yontif came in, it was one animal, one living animal, and therefore you're going to have to take into account your friend's tchum. Whereas by the barrel of wine, which is not a living organism, so over here I could say that retroactively, it clarifies that this wine is mine, and that wine is his, and the wine that I'm drinking, I can take to the tchum wherever I want to go. So there's a difference between a living animal and a barrel of wine. That's Rav's svara. Sagt the Gemara, Amri lei Rav Kahane v'Ravasi l'Rav. So Rav Kahane and Rav Asi said to Rav as follows: L'Isser muktzeh loy chashashu. Now, the Isser of muktzeh you're not concerned about. L'Isser tchumin chashashu, and you're only concerned about the Isser of tchumin. What's the question of the Gemara? So Rashi explains the question of the Gemara is that if you're going to tell me that when it comes to this when it comes to this barrel over here, or when it comes to the behemoth, so that we say yesh breida, and therefore it retroactively clarifies that this part is mine, and this part is yours, and this part I can take to my tchum, and this part you can take to your tchum, and so on. If so, you should say the same thing regarding the subject of muktzeh. What does muktzeh mean? Muktzeh means that I do not want to use that part of the animal. I have my part that I want for myself, the other part I don't want to use at all. And the same your friend. Your friend has his part that he wants to drink from, the other part he makes up his mind, that's not mine, that's yours, I don't want to have anything to do with it. So therefore Rashi says, the question over here is, just like he's saying regarding the tchum, that we separate one part from another, you have your tchum that you can take it to, and your friend has his tchum that he can take it to, you should say the same thing regarding muktzeh. That there's a part that's yours, and you want to eat, and the other one has nothing to do with you, it's separated. And the same thing regarding your friend. There's a part that's his, and there's the other part that he doesn't want to eat, and you make up your mind clearly that I have nothing to do with that part, so it should be muktzeh for you. So each one of these partners in his mind has separated the other part that's not his, that he doesn't want it at all. So if so, shouldn't there be an issue of muktzeh over here? And the Mefarshim add to this, it's not only that each one of them makes up that he doesn't want to eat the other part that belongs to his friend, each one is taking their part from this animal or from this barrel of wine to their own tchum, to a different place, or at least regarding the barrel of wine. Maybe not by the animal, because Rav holds that each one could only take it to the tchum that his friend has. But by the barrel of wine, each one is taking it to their own tchum. So you're totally separating yourself from that part that belongs to your friend. So there should be an issue of muktzeh. Why are you discussing only the issue of tchumim, but there should also be an issue of muktzeh over here? That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. So on this, the Gemara says, Shasik Rav. Rav was quiet. Rav did not answer this question. The Gemara says, Mai Havi Allah. What's the psak din regarding this question over here? When you have this partnership regarding the question of tchumin, could you carry it to your own tchum, or do you have to take into account your friend's tchum? So the Gemara brings other Amiram that argued about this. Rabbi Shia Amar Yesh Breida. Rabbi Shia said that we follow the concept of Breida, that it retroactively clarifies that it was always split, and each one could take it to their tchum, and he does not make the distinction between the wine or the behemoth. There's always Yesh Breida. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ein Breida. Rabbi Yochanan says we always say that it does not retroactively clarify. When Yontif came in, it was mixed and it belonged to both of them, and therefore they always have to take into account their friend's tchum. So now the Gemara will discuss this concept of Breida according to both Rabbi Ishia's opinion and Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Let's see. Fragt the Gemara, v'savar Rabbi Ishia yesh Breida? Does Rabbi Ishia hold that we follow the concept of Breida? But vatnan, we learned in a Mishnah, hameis babayis. You have a dead body that's inside a house. So the halacha regarding a dead body in a house is, besides in that house, under the same roof, everything becomes tamei. There's a gzeira of Chazal that all the doorways, everything under the doorways also become tamei. And v'loi psachim harbe, there are many doorways. So kulan tmeim, the door is closed of all of them, and you don't know which one the dead body is going to be taken out from. The gzeira is because the dead body is going to come out from one of them, and therefore everything there becomes tamei. So all of the doorways are tamei. Niftach echad mehen, if one of the doorways was opened up, so then hu tamei. Now only that doorway is going to be tamei, v'kulan tahirin. The rest of them are all going to be tahir, because now that that one is open, we know that's where the mace is going out from. Same thing, chashav lahitziyai be'echad mehen. If you intended to take out the mace from only one of these openings, one of these doorways, oy b'chalain sheyesh boi arba al arba, or there's a window that has a space of 4x4 tfachim, which is the minimum space to be able to take out the mace. So then, matzeles al apsachim kulam. So this will now save all the other entrances or windows from tumah that they do not have tumah, because the mace is going to go out only from with this opening, from this doorway or from this window. Beishamai yoimrem, Beishamai say, Vuhu shachoshav olav ad shelo yamus. This that we say, that if a person intended to take out the mace from one doorway, that now the rest become tahor, that's only if he intended this, if he had this in mind before the mace passed away. Once the mace passes away and the gzeira of Chazal takes effect, that these doorways are tamei, your intention that you have to take it out from one doorway does not change the status of that gzeira, of that tumah that took effect by all of the doorways. Beis Hillel loimrim, Beis Hillel say, Af mishayamos hames. Your intention to take out the mace from one doorway will be effective even after the mace passed away, even though originally the gzeira of the tumah is on all the doorways, but now that you intended to take out the mace from one, it changes the status and it's matzel the other doorways, and now only this doorway will be tummy. So that's their machlokes. When you have that intention, so Beis Shammai says it's only if it was before the mace passed away, but once the tumah took effect on all the doorways, you can't change it. And Beis Hillel says that even after the mace passed away, if you now have the intention to take out the mace from one doorway, it will now change the status and take off the tumah of the other doorways. And on that Beitza we learned, or on that Mishnah we learned, Rabbi Shia said, L'tayer es hapsachim mikanu lahaba. The argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is only as far as being mitayer the doorways from here going forward, from the time when the person had this machshava to take the mace out of this doorway. So the Gemara explains, Mikana lahaba in, only from here going forward does the machshava have an effect to now change the status of the other doorways according to Beis Hillel. But retroactively, your machshava that you have now will not retroactively clarify that from the moment this mace passed away, he was destined to go out from this door. In other words, this is another case where we have this concept of breira, yesh breira or ein breira. Now that you had this machshava that you want to take the mace only out of this particular doorway. So if I hold of yesh breira, then I'll say that now that you had that intention, this retroactively clarifies that this mace was from the beginning destined to leave from this particular doorway. So any object that was in any other doorway from the beginning of when the mace passed away should not be tummy, because now retroactively it clarifies that the mace wasn't supposed to go out from there. It's going to go out only from this doorway. But Rabbi Shia comes and says, Ein breira. No, from the time that you had that intention to take the mace out of one doorway, from there forward, it changes the status that only that doorway is tummy and none of the others. But before, the others were maybe possible that the mace would be taken out from there. It does not retroactively change the status of the other doorways, and therefore any object in the other doorways from before will be tummy. So here, I clearly see that Rabbi Shia does not hold of the concept of breira. So why does Rabbi Shia regarding tchumen say yesh breira? So the Gemara says, Eipach. So we have to switch the opinions. Rabbi Shia mein breira. Rabbi Shia is the one that says ein breira, as we see here regarding this Mishnah of Tumah. And Rabbi Yochanan ama yesh breira. And Rabbi Yochanan is the one that does hold of breira over there regarding tchumen. So now the Gemara turns to Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Does Rabbi Yochanan hold of this concept of breira? But Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, brothers that divided the possessions that they yarshin from their father. So Rabbi Yochanan says, they're considered to be like they bought this. And therefore when Yovel comes, the halacha of Yovel is that anyone that bought any property has to return it to the original owner. So over here, by these inheritors, they also have to return it in Yovel just like people that bought. And this is also connected to the concept of breira. If I hold of breira, so then essentially what that means is that when I divide the possessions of the father amongst the brothers, this clarifies retroactively that each one of them from the beginning, this was your Yerusha. This is what you yarshin from your father. So you're not buying it. This was your portion that you yarshin from your father. If I hold ein breira, so then in the beginning it was all mixed. The possessions belong to everybody together. And now, when you divide it, it's only from here forward that it's like you bought it. You got your part from here going forward. So Rabbi Yochanan that compares it to Lekuchais apparently holds ein breira. And therefore, you have to return it in Yovel. Now, you might argue and say, I'll answer you. Chi lesle Rabbi Yochanan breire b'doiraisa. Rabbi Yochanan does not hold to the concept of breire when it comes to something which is menat Torah, which is over here. The halacha of Yovel regarding these brothers that Yarshan, that's a halacha menat Torah. So here he does not rely on the concept of breire. Aval b'derabanan, but before we were discussing Erev Tchumen, which is only a ism b'derabanan, isle. Maybe regarding a halacha b'derabanan, there he does hold of breire. But that's not true. Ub'derabanan, mi isle. When it comes to something b'derabanan, does he hold of breire? V'hatani, but we learned in Abraise. So here, this is minigay to Erev Tchumen. Rashi over here brings the Mishnah in Erevin, that brings the beginning of this Mishnah, where a person wants to make a condition regarding his Erev Tchumen. He wants to make an Erev Tchumen on two different directions, opposite directions, because he's not sure exactly which side he wants to go to. He gets the information that there's a Rav, someone that's coming to give a drasha, and he wants to be able to go and join to hear this drasha, but he doesn't know if he wants to go to Tzafin or he wants to go to Dorin, or Mizrach, or Maidev. So therefore, he makes a condition, he puts the Erev on both sides, and he makes a condition and says, if he's going to come from Maidev side, my Erev on Maidev should be an Erev. If he's going to come on Mizrach side, so then I'm going to choose to go to Mizrach side. That's the that's the way he makes his Erev. That's what the Tanakama there says. And so the Tanakama says that he can make an Erev with this kind of a condition, that he's going to decide tomorrow on Shabbos itself where he wants to go. And on this, there's a brayso that says, V'atoni ayoy. So ayoy said, Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein adam masna al shnei dvarim ke'echad. A person cannot make this condition for two different sides, to go in two different directions at the same time. Ella, im ba chacham lemizrach, eruve lemizrach. If the chacham comes to Mizrach side, so then he has an Erev going towards Mizrach. L'maidev, if the Chacham comes to Maidev side, then L'maidev, then he can go towards Maidev. Right? So in other words, he could only go to one side or another. Now the Gemara explains, V'ilu lekan u lekan loy. But to be able to go to both sides, if a person wants to be able to choose on Yontif itself, that he wants to be able to go to both sides, that on Yontif itself he's going to decide which side he wants to go to, that's something that the person cannot choose which side he wants to go to. And on this the question was asked, so what was Aye saying over here? What was Rabbi Yehuda really saying? Rabbi Yehuda was saying that if you have one Chacham that was coming either to Mizrach or to Maidev, so then you can make an Erev and you can decide if you want to go to Mizrach or you want to go to Maidev. That you could. But if you have a Chacham that comes both to Mizrach and to Maidev, and now you want to choose on Shabbos itself which one you're going to go to, that you can't choose on Shabbos itself. If they came to both sides, that you can't choose. Now the Gemara says, the question was asked of this, what's the difference? What's the difference? When you have a person that wants to choose from both sides, he can go either this side or the other side. He has a Chacham that came over here, and he wants to choose which side to go to, so he can't. Why not? The Ein Bereida. Because we can't say that retroactively from when you choose, now I say that retroactively when Shabbos came in, this is where your Erev was. So again, this is the subject of Bereida here. When a person makes that choice on Shabbos, where he's going to go, which Erev he's going to use, he's making that choice on Shabbos. The problem is, though, that the Erev Tchumen has to be established by Bein HaShmoshes. So if you hold Ein Bereida, you cannot choose on Shabbos and now say that retroactively this clarifies where my Erev was when Shabbos came in. So if you hold that Ein Bereida, Mizrach or Maidev, Nami, Ein Bereida. So if one Chacham is coming, and the Chacham is coming either on Mizrach or on Maidev, and on Shabbos you're going to find out where the Chacham is, so you shouldn't be able to choose this on Shabbos as well either. So what difference is there if the Chacham is coming lekan u lekan, when you're choosing from both places that the Chacham is, there's a Chacham on both sides, and you want to choose which side to go to on Shabbos. So over there I say Ein Bereida, you can't retroactively choose this. And the same thing if you're choosing to go either to Mizrach or to Maidev, because there's one Chacham that either came to Mizrach or to Maidev, you also shouldn't be able to retroactively choose this. So the Gemara says, V'amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan said, Ukvar ba Chacham. In the case in the Reisha where it says, where Rabbi Yehuda said that you could choose either to go to Mizrach or to go to Ma'ariv, the case over there is the Chacham already arrived from before Shabbos. He already arrived before Shabbos either to Mizrach or to Ma'ariv, so that's not something that you're choosing now on Shabbos. It already happened by Ben Hashmashis. And therefore, when Shabbos came in, the Chacham already arrived over there, so it was already established by Ben Hashmashis. You don't have to rely on Breira. And Rashi says, even if you're not aware of this, even if you don't know where the Chacham came, but the fact is the Chacham already came to one side, and therefore the side of where your Eidav is going to be set has been established already when Yontif came in, so you're not relying on Breira. But in a case where you are relying on Breira, where on Shabbos you have both sides to choose from, there's a Chacham on both sides, and you're going to be choosing on Shabbos itself which side you want to go to, Ein Breira. You can't choose on Shabbos itself which side you want to go to and say that your Eidav is not going to be retroactively set from Ben Hashmashis. So what do you see over here? That Rabbi Yochanan does not hold of the concept of Breira, not only regarding a case of Minat Torah, which was Yovel, but also regarding a case of Midrabanan, right over here, regarding Tchumen. So Rabbi Yochanan does not hold of Breira. Alme, Lesle, Rabbi Yochanan Breira. Rabbi Yochanan does not hold Breira over here. So therefore the Gemara goes back and says, Elo lo oilam loy tepech. So really, we're not going to switch the opinions the way we said it before. We're going to leave it as is. And v'chi lesle le Rabbi Shia Breira. When we said before that Rabbi Shia does not hold of Breira, we brought a raya from the case of the Tumah and the doorways. When does Rabbi Shia not hold of Breira? B'dairaisa. Over there where we're dealing with Tumah, which is a dairaisa. Aval b'derabanan, but when it comes to Tchumen, which is midrabanan, over here Rabbi Yochanan does hold of. Over here Rabbi Shia, that is, does hold of Breira. So Rashi actually says over here that the tumah that there is in the derech yitziyasa is, even though it's not mamish minat Torah, but it's a halacha l'Moshe misinai. So therefore over here he does hold of the inyan of Breira. But when it comes to the Tchumen, that's midrabanan, over here he does not hold of the inyan of Breira. So therefore that resolves this problem regarding Breira. According to the opinion of Rabbi Shia, we make a distinction between Midairaisa and Midrabanan. The Gemara concludes, Darash Mar Zutre darshan then said, Halacha ke Rabbi Shia, that we follow the halacha like Rabbi Shia, that we say that yesh Breira, and therefore if you're partners with an animal or with a barrel of wine, each one takes it to the place that he wants to go.